This short video is to show you the typical day of the Poly 1 running at Ribble Valley Live Steamers. First of all, we need to get the engine, it's already been taken out of the car, and now I need to roll it down to the steaming bay to steam the engine up. On the steaming bay at Ribble Valley Live Steamers there's water and an airline. I'll start by filling the side tanks, and there's already water in the boiler. To start with, we close all the valves, which I personally leave open to avoid any vacuum forming in the boiler. So when we do start to build up steam, it isn't just escaping through the open valves. So you need some flammable, either wood soaked in paraffin, for example, or white spirits, or in this case we're using charcoal soaked in white spirits, but you can use barbecue lighting fluid. People can use firelighters, for example, so there's a whole variety, whichever you can easily get hold of. This is just what the club provide. And I personally fill up about halfway in the firebox to get a good fire and enough time to get coal on. Unlike the full-size engines, this has to have an artificial draft because the engine just plainly isn't big enough to draw its own fire. So either you can use an electric motor to literally suck through the chimney to get a draft from the fire, or in this case we have one which is worked from an air compressor, and this literally blows air up through the top like so, and draws a fire until the engine has enough pressure to use its own built-in auxiliary blower. So let's get the fire lit. Just a piece of charcoal, set it on fire. I personally hold it near the door just to so it doesn't blow out with the wind, and throw it in. And we'll switch on the blower which you've just seen. And it's now drawing the fire. Now we'll lubricate all the moving parts whilst the engine is building up steam. Now on this particular engine there is a steam pump which also needs lubricating separately to the main engine with some lighter oil. And we also need to fill up the mechanical lubricator for the engine itself. Now that the engine's reaching working pressure, we can take off the auxiliary blower and use the engine's own built-in blower. Now this would be a good time to describe what all the parts do and all the different valves on the engine. This one here, as previously mentioned, is a blower. And this draws the fire inside the engine to either make the fire burn hotter by essentially drawing the fire. This one here is the steam valve for the injector. This is a steam valve for the steam pump, which you've already seen. This is the whistle. This is the water gauge and blowdown, which clears it. And the water gauge shows how much water is in the boiler. This here is a pressure gauge, and it shows how much pressure is in the boiler. On this engine, the working pressure is 90 psi, and this valve over here is a water bypass for the axle pump. When the boiler has more than 90 psi in the boiler, it will lift on the safety relief valve, which it is doing now, to ensure that the boiler remains safe, because if it gets above that, it will just literally escape into the atmosphere, as you can see. Now to move the engine, you just open the regulator very slowly. Noting that there's enough water in the boiler, above halfway. It's 90 psi there. Let's open it a little bit more. You'll notice that the water does bob up and down in the sight glass. The aim is to keep it about halfway. Any lower than this, you want to fill up to make sure it comes up to about halfway to 3/4 full. Switch on the bypass valve just to keep the pressure down, because I'm only just pulling me, so I'll find that the boiler will be producing too much steam. So that's just pumping water into the boiler just to keep the pressure. Have a look at the fire. Nice hot glowing fire there. The aim with the fire is to keep it just below the door. Any lower than this, that you may find that you don't have enough fire and enough heat to keep the engine in steam. Any higher than this, you may actually choke the engine with too much fire and it may not produce steam efficiently. Now we're back at the station, we'll fill the water and coal back up for another lap round the track. After a day's running, it's important that the engine is properly cleaned down. So in the smoke box, ash builds up which needs to be cleared out. cylinders and steam chest is also lubricated after the run to ensure that it's protected whilst it's in storage and ready for the next run.